Hello and welcome to Technology Artist in New York. My guest today is Jay Stinson, and he's the CEO of Cryosecurity. Hello Jay, welcome to the channel.
Thank you for having me.
Can you tell me a little bit about your background and field of expertise, and how do you get into crypto security?
I first got involved in 2010, more or less stumbled upon Bitcoin, found out there was one specific website that had Bitcoin, so didn't know what it was, did some research, found out that you could mine it. So I began mining it, just pretty much jerry-rigged some GPUs that I had and was mining the Bitcoin. And then my background really comes from a computer science background with a focus on cryptography. So I knew that there were obviously the inherent issues with storing your funds. So at the time, there were own software wallets. So I was creating my own hardware modules to secure my assets, storing it, pulling it off the network. And then I was really excited for it. I mean, it was very cheap at the time, so I didn't think anything of it. I was more or less just mining it along the way. I just liked the idea of digital currency. It was very, the whole idea behind it, bought into it. Got into Litecoin as well, was mining that. That was around, I think, towards the end of 2011. And then I started mining Ethereum towards the, I guess, beginning of 2016. So as I was doing that, I really then just started reaching out to friends and family who had digital assets. So I began to store it for them, more or less how to pull it off the network, creating all these private keys offline. So that was my goal. And then really the past 2 years I've begun to work with crypto funds. And then now from crypto funds, I branched into high net worth individuals, family offices, now working with crypto exchanges, as well as OTC trading firms. So dealing with all aspects of storing the assets, and I build a self-custody platform where they can control their assets.
You said you started 2010. That's really very early in the game. Can you explain a little bit, how did you become aware of the existence of cryptocurrencies? Did you read it in the papers, or was it your community? Give me a little detail on how you found out about it.
From the Silk Road. Silk Road was the website that I had heard about. I was like, there's no way that this kind of marketplace exists online. So of course, got involved, downloaded Tor, went searching, found it. Of course, it wasn't very tough to find it on Tor. And then everything you could purchase was through Bitcoin. So at the time, I didn't know what Bitcoin was. There were no pieces there were no financial pieces about it that you see like on MSNBC or CNBC. So, you doing your own research, you found out there's a way to mine it. So I was like, okay, this is perfect. I had some GPUs that were lying around. I was like, this is passive income. And at the time, I didn't think anything of it, didn't think it was going to go up in terms of magnitude. So more or less, I was just mining it just for fun, have a few extra bucks. And then, of course, then it started going up. And I was using it along the way. It's not like I still have millions and millions of Bitcoin. I like the idea of what it stood for. So anytime there were online merchants, I was going in, if they offered something that you could buy through Bitcoin, I said, hey, instead of me having to use, US dollars, I could use Bitcoin, which was just running off whatever I had running. So it was perfectly fine. So I was like, this is great. And so that's really what pulled me in. And of course, the whole idea, a lot of the security issues that come along with it, as well as what was going on at the time. It was just after the 2008 financial crisis. So a lot of people had this sentiment against, central banking. And I really did a lot more research into it. So this was a way for people to circumvent those powers.
Were you aware of the traceability of Bitcoins as it is today through Coinbase?
At the time, I thought it was all completely anonymous. After doing obviously more and more research, found out that it's only just pseudo-anonymous and that there are ways, to trace it back. So at the time, didn't think anything. I just saw it's a bunch of numbers. But I knew obviously that computer programs could be written to possibly link. And so I knew anytime if I were to put my at-home address or if I were to put like an email in, I knew that was going to be linked to me no matter what. So I knew that there were issues. I'm privacy focused. I'm privacy centered, as well as, obviously being a security guy. So I knew that, I'm trying to avoid linking any information. If I wanted to really for it to be anonymous, I would avoid linking that information anyway, making that connection.
Very smart. So when you studied cryptography, what were the applications back in the day before cryptocurrency? What was encryption being used for?
You're looking at ways to secure either messaging systems, secure data. So, and to prevent you want to make sure that integrity is carried across wherever you're sending it, as well as the authenticity of the message. So a lot of what I was doing it for, more or less in my spare time, was sending emails through using a specific encryption protocol called PGP, which there's some platforms that are using it now, and it makes it a little easier to implement PGP. But doing it at the time, it's so cumbersome. It still is cumbersome, but I more or less was doing that as a hobby, saying, hey, listen, there's ways for me to go and send information over email that I can secure and make sure that no one else can read it unless it's the person that I'm sending to directly. And what really brought me to this whole idea was after the Snowden leaks, 2013, that really pushed me over. After seeing all the information that he had seen and that he had to the population, you could see that there was so much implication involved with the government and how they were pretty much monitoring everything. So you've got a lot of these standards, a lot of these crypto protocols that have been developed by the government or are in use by the government. So these standards are, if the government's using them and they're, let's say, the highest funded government in the world, that there's a reason that they're using them. So if you can implement these kind of standards to your life, you don't have to worry about the privacy implications that follow along with it.
Right. I remember that. I was back in 1996. I was coding the first top-level domain registry, and we were suing Network Solutions, who had the monopoly at the time, in court, and we were using PGP for our communications all the time. It was kind of tricky, but it was not that hard. There was a piece of software you can just put in your keys, and it would come out like that. The whole traceability issue of Bitcoin and Darknet, this is where privacy coins come into play. Can you talk a little bit about what the major difference between privacy coins is, maybe between Monero and Zcash, or whatever you would like to talk about?
I've been looking into Monero more recently, and it's private by default. You don't have to you don't have to push a button to make sure that you're using a specific transaction. You don't need to worry about possibly sent, and it's in the clear. So that's really the biggest thing that I see from Monero. They want to find a way to reduce transaction sizes, and they want efficient range proof. So they're looking into bulletproofs. So they had just a security audit, and the security audit came back. Looks like there were no issues with the security audit for the bulletproofs. So I think they're looking to implement that within the next update. So with the protocol, it's very, very short proofs, and it's without a trusted setup. So there are ZK snarks, but ZK snarks, which are used by Zcash, the ZK snarks, it requires a trusted setup. So there's a party in place that you need to trust, which the bulletproofs, it's more beneficial. It can help in the decentralization. Now, the efficiency of bulletproofs is particularly well suited for that trustless nature of the blockchains. That's the whole idea of it not having to worry for that third party. So with those bulletproofs, you can have the quicker transactions, and it would obviously be much cheaper. Now, the other thing that I was looking at, which is Covery. So that is going to be the implementation of your transaction ID. The transaction will be obfuscated over IP. So they won't be able to tell your IP address, which at the time, using even Monero 2014, 2015, you're seeing this, and I'm buying into it. I'm going, there's everything is completely secure. And then you find out that they could still even tell your IP address from the transaction. They're looking to have an alpha release by the end of 2018. So it'll allow for segmentation between your transaction ID and your IP address. So there's implications here. So I can go and use it, and I don't have to worry about if I send it to you to buy whatever I want. It's no problem because it's a private transaction between me and you. There's no issue there. And if you want to circumvent, let's say, a government that's looking to see what you're doing, this is a way to do that. Now, also, this can allow for help for people who are mining in adversarial countries or even running a node in adversarial countries. And obviously, the more nodes they run, the more nodes that run the Monero network, obviously, the more secure it is. You can allow for that decentralization factor. So I think that's huge. Now, for Zcash, more or less, I've been looking into, obviously, the ZK snarks. And I believe I've seen the number. I'm not 100% sure if this is the number, but I think it was 5% of actual transactions use zero knowledge proof. So that in itself That's why I would want something like a Monero where you don't have to worry about turning on that switch for privacy. You could have it already inherently in place. The ZK Snarks, it allows a lot of computing power. It takes up a lot of computing power. So you wouldn't really be able to do that off a phone currently. But they're looking to implement something like this called Sapling, which is, let me see when they said they were going to do it. I believe it's towards the end of this year, maybe within the next few months, maybe in October. So it's called Sapling, and it'll help bring Zcash to a completeness and privacy, to allow for performance updates to shielded transactions, which will allow for your transaction, however you're sending it to. It'll be much quicker. It'll take obviously much less memory, and then also the spending authority. It decouples spending authority. You could sign transactions in one place, and then you can have let's say a viewing key in another place that you can allow the transaction to occur, or you can pretty much signing the transaction on a different platform. And then also the improved keys allows for viewing keys of incoming and outgoing transactions. So with those incoming and outgoing transactions, that'll help in, let's say, giving this to a third party, an auditor. So I think that's important also to imply, let's say, for let's say larger companies that need some kind of eye into what they're doing. And then also a lot of these other cryptocurrencies, Dash, it's looking at a Tor routed DAPI implementation for private send. So it's similar to what Kovri is, from what I can glean. It's similar to what Kovri is going to do, and they're looking to implement that. I don't know if there's going to be the perfect one. I definitely think from what I've seen, Monero does a very good job, but the Monero team themselves have said it's an evolution. They're constantly adapting to security issues, and they're always implementing newer and newer fixes to their network and to the cryptocurrency. So I think that's what it is. It's really just an evolution along the way, and they're adapting to it. So Pivx is also doing something where they're looking to implement Dandelion protocol, which aims to make the IP of the sender virtually untraceable, similar to Kovri, similar to that aspect of what private send is as well. And then they've got a masternode system, and they are going to be able to have this masternode system where you can gain your Pivx while it's stored on a hardware wallet. And currently they don't have that really in place for any of these other cryptocurrencies. And finally, the thing that I've seen that the security and privacy implementation that I've seen, which seems very promising, is the Enigma platform. And so what they want to do is they want to build end-to-end encrypted smart contracts, referred to as secret contracts. So I think that would be cool in the fact that you can have these private smart contracts between people, and you don't have to worry about it being out completely in a public ledger.
Yeah, that sounds very cool. And I agree, everything is in progress. You can't really say the one is better than the other one because there might be some technology in the works that's an ongoing thing. Can you just talk a little bit about fungibility? Doesn't have a security coin to be fungible in order to be really identical. That's what fungibility means. Fungibility means identical. It means that you cannot distinguish one coin from the other. And Monero has that. Can you explain how fungibility works and why it is so important?
The way this is set in place, I mean, I've even dealt with clients that I've seen, and they pay a premium for, let's say, virgin mined Bitcoin that has just been mined, as opposed to, let's say, Bitcoin that might have been tumbling around in, let's say, these peer-to-peer trading in-person platforms, or let's say coming from Silk Road. Because everything is completely within Bitcoin, everything is completely public. You have the ability to trace back where its original source is from. So there's blacklisted addresses, or addresses that have taken these funds from, let's say, maybe not so clean areas, or what these central authorities deem not clean. They blacklist these addresses. So fungibility for Monero, and I believe there's some other ones that are coming into play. I had read somewhere that Pivx is completely fungible, but I'm not 100% sure with that. Really, what you need to do is you need a completely private blockchain. If it's private by default, you don't know where it came from. As opposed to, let's say, something like a Zcash or a Dash, they're not private by default. I can see where it's come from. And of course, that if I know where this coin came from, that value can change, and I can put a different value, as opposed to this one where I don't know where it's come from at all. Verge isn't fungible because its blockchain isn't inherently private.
If you're speaking about it from an investor point of view. So you still have to keep in mind the on and off ramps. So what happens if the exchanges, like what happened in Japan, if the exchanges ban Monero from them? So if you do not have any way of exchanging Monero into US dollars or other cryptocurrencies in order to cash in on and off, where would you see the value of Monero go if that's going to happen worldwide?
So if they completely shut it out of exchanges, I think it'll be tougher for, let's say, mainstream adoption. But a lot of people that want this private implication, you see all these data breaches that occur. You see the issues with privacy. And I think over time, people are going to start moving towards something that you wouldn't want to use a Bitcoin if or you wouldn't want to take payment from your employer in Bitcoin if they can see exactly how much Bitcoin is sent to you, every 2 weeks or every week, every time your check is supposed to be coming in. So those use cases will push people for a privacy cryptocurrency like Monero, like Zcash. It'll happen. It might not be as quick, but I think the demand from people to want to use something like this will be beneficial.
Yes, I agree. I mean, no coin is perfect. We heard at the last meetup from Xcubicle, we heard that there was a double spending issue with one of the Monero wallets. That was kind of surprising to me that got out like that. And there were a lot of attacks on the Verge platform, right? There were at least 2 confirmed hacks. There might have been a third one. If you can explain a little bit the attack platforms today, what's the 51% and what's a timestamp spoof?
51% attack, it affects proof of work cryptocurrencies. So 51% attack is you've got nodes that are securing the network. So if someone can gain more than 50% of a network's hashing power, they can then alter the ledger. They can alter the distributed ledger. So that happened on a few cryptocurrencies. So Verge had at least 2 51% attacks. Bitcoin Gold, as well as Zencash and Electroneum, from what I've seen. So what they do is the double spend occurs after 51% of the network's controlled. You can then double spend, or the attacker can double spend their cryptocurrency. So they can send it to Alice and they can send it to Bob. And because they're controlling the ledger, they can pretty much send it to both of them. And because digital assets can be completely copied, and obviously it's digital, so it's so easy to do that, you can't tell the difference. So Alice can't tell the difference, Bob can't tell the difference. And because I'm the malicious attacker, I'm controlling 51% of the network, I can then control exactly how that looks. And then also, you can then go back and mess with the history of the blocks, your block history. So they can go back and change transaction records that have occurred. So obviously, the farther back the transaction happened, the tougher it is. And Bitcoin hard codes, after a while, there's checkpoints where they hard code the checkpoints up to that certain point. So you can't go any farther back than this checkpoint. So it then allows for, let's say, the whole network not to be completely destabilized by a 51% attack. So the larger the network, the more secure it would be to avoid a 51% attack. And so speaking to the timestamp spoof, what occurred for Verge was it was a bug in their code. So the attacker was able to spoof it, was pretty much mod a timestamp within a 2-hour window. And then after it modded that timestamp, so let's say it was within an hour, it was then able to add a next transaction block. I believe Verge transactions blocks are every second. So it was able to add another block right after that with a certain amount of Verge in it. And so it was able to pretty much spoof that and just add on to it. And it happened I've seen different sources saying it happened for 3 hours, it happened for 13 hours, but they were able to walk away with quite a few Verge. And that was this attack. And there's actually a pretty cool site that I saw at the website that helps calculate the possible cost for a 51% attack on specific cryptocurrencies on its own network. It's called crypto51.app, and it'll tell you what it would cost for a 1-hour attack. It lists the cost for a 1-hour attack on the network. Of the renowned coins, Bitcoin costs a little more than $500 for an hour. Bitcoin private costs around $180 to do a 51% attack. Costs $180. So when you see it's so cheap for people to do this, there's incentive there. But now Bitcoin costs close to $500,000 an hour. So a lot of people say China has over 50% of the hashing power, or they've got close to 50% of the hashing power. So if they go spend, millions of dollars to get all this hardware and then smash the network and destroy Bitcoin, they're just doing it to lose money. So there's no financial gain for Bitcoin to do that, but there could be if there's, let's say, a government, somebody that wants to completely destroy. If they're not doing it for if they're not looking for financial gain, there could be other reasons why people choose to do this.
Let's talk a little bit about the communities. So I feel that the different communities are really fighting each other as hard as they can. So there is like the Bitcoin guys don't like the Bitcoin Cash guys, the Verge guys don't like the Monero guys, and the Zcash guys don't like anybody, and so on and so forth. What's your opinion about this hostility? Is it because everybody wants to be the number one and they're fighting about their space in the blockchain? What's your thoughts? What's your thoughts about the different departments that are out there and how they conduct themselves?
I think a lot of people that I've dealt with in this space are very friendly. I've seen obviously people that are angry at other groups. It's more or less just they're just, like you said. I think that they're fighting for number one spot, or they want to be heard. But I think it's all healthy competition. I don't think there's any harm in it. I mean, as you really look, and if you get involved, you're really going to do your own research, and you're going to see what you believe makes the most sense for you. So if you buy into this guy screaming at the top of his lungs that his let's say fork of a cryptocurrency is better than another person's cryptocurrency, then that'll be onto the individual to go look up and actually understand. So hey, some people might not do that and they might just buy into it, but in the end, who else is more in charge of themselves but the individual? So you're going to have to go do the research and find out, hey, if Bitcoin works better than Bitcoin Cash, or if Bitcoin Cash works better than Bitcoin. It's going to be really up to the market to use that implementation. Same exact thing with Monero. I mean, there's use cases for it, and that's why people use it. Same thing for Zcash. Same thing for any of these other let's say tokens that are used. There's use cases for them, or if there aren't, then they fall by the wayside. So I think it's healthy competition, and of course it can get ugly a little, but you're going to see that in any kind of developing space. You're going to see, of course, there's going to be good people, there's going to be bad people, there's going to be people that want to yell, people that want to talk peacefully. So I think there's use for everything. There's use for all that kind of information, and no matter what, I think the important ones are going to succeed, and people are going to build on that. And that's why I think, and that's why I was so really pulled into it, is the fact that it's up to the person, it's up to the individual to what they're doing, and you're going to buy into what you believe. And I can show you all this information, but if you don't want to take it, then that's on you.
Very cool. Thank you, Jay, for coming onto the channel. And if you guys would like to see more videos, please subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell for notifications so we can send you messages when we have new videos. Thank you for watching Technology Artist.